Hello. So the other day my so-called friend, let's call him James, decided to crap on my new speaker from the previous video. He said it wasn't loud or hefty enough, so I decided to make one to fulfill his requirements. So I have these radio/CD players which we're going to use as amplifying boards, and I have these speakers. And then we want to take apart the radios, which was actually done in a previous video. We also have this iPhone amplifier which we're going to take apart. Other than the iPhone amplifier, none of the amplifying boards had an aux input. After some experimentation, I figured out that you can play an aux signal through the CD connector. So let's switch this radio to CD mode, prepare an aux cable, and test it out. One of the other radios works on the same principle of playing through the CD connector. The third radio, however, was a bit more complicated, and me being an idiot decided to just randomly plug stuff in and hope that it worked, which resulted in a bit of red colour and stench, and it made everything a bit warm, so I had a nice lolly. Some experimentation was then done on wiring the speakers up in different combinations of series and parallel circuits so that multiple speakers could be used at once or by any one amplifying board instead of only one or two speakers per board. I then went back to the hardware and found an arrangement of speakers that I was happy with, and then changed it a bunch of times, even after writing it out very professionally. But you get the gist. I needed some materials, so I went and nicked someone's door and started chopping it up. So I had a good time chopping out all my small pieces, making extra pieces out of old shelving because the door wasn't big enough. Then I started finalizing design on the final piece, marking where speakers should go and which bits to cut off. And then I accurately marked up the centers of the holes for the speakers, ignored those markings completely, and just drilled a massive hole through the board with a hole saw. That process was then repeated for all the other speakers. Where I didn't quite have the right sized hole saw, I needed to make some additional adjustments with a knife. After getting all of the speakers fitted, I had a few more pieces I needed to chop off. And then I started the first rough assembly. Okay, so slight design change. We're going to cut an angle in here so that this piece can sit flat on top. And also, then these won't really fit properly, and I don't really like the placement of them anyways. So we're going to cut an angle out of there on both sides, and then just cover that over. So I went ahead and did what real-time me told me to do, and then realised I didn't take into account the requirement for an angled cut. And it seems this is the point at which I stopped trying to do things properly and just started botching everything. So I just started whacking on randomly shaped pieces and power sanding off the excess, because I'm a failure and a fraud. To further demonstrate this, I needed to fill in the gaps with something. I didn't have any wood filler, so I used the closest thing that I had lying around, which was tile adhesive. So I mixed that up, slopped it on with my fingers, let it dry, and then just sanded off the excess. And then I decided it was time to try and make it look pretty, so I went and grabbed some spray paint, gave it a spray, and ran out of spray paint. Who would ever have need for only 1.5 square meters of paint? So I think we can all agree that at the moment it looks like a hunk of junk. So I hopped on my bike, went back to the shop, and grabbed some more paint, but not spray paint this time. But first I decided to make and fit a back for the speakers. For the paint this time, I decided to try and make it brown with some red streaking through it, or rather autumn and bitter chocolate. But first, for professional painting, we need to make ourselves a colour palette.
And then we need to sort out our colour mix before we slap it on. And once that had dried, it was time to start assembling this whole speaker system. The speakers without screw holes were fixed in place using no more nails. Again, just the closest thing to what I actually needed that I had lying around. And then it was time to do the finicky job of wiring the speakers. The goal here was to make groups that equated to either 4 or 8 ohm resistance. And then it was time to add a handle, so I went and bin searched and found this old work bag and cut off the handle from there. And then fixed it onto the speaker with screws. Sadly, there were a few losses during this project. One because I turned on the amplifier with a screw sitting underneath it, so it shorted and died. That was a bit dumb. And the iPhone amplifier board was ditched because it's digital and you have to go through a set of clicks every time to get it up to volume, and that wasn't worth it. And also at this point I had gotten a bit bored of the project, so I couldn't be bothered to fix it. And so I only had one amplifying board left, which I wired in, and then made space for the power cable through the back. And added an aux connector. And so it should be loud enough, even though there is only one amplifier board. I'll find more in the future. Bonkers! Or buy one. And as for the heft, it's reasonably heavy as it is, but I've got this solid brick of lead that I can put in there if I want to. There is some further work I could do at this point, for example adding high and low pass filters for the small and large speakers respectively. But to be honest, at this point, I've been working on it so long I'm a bit bored of it. Longer than I should have. And there you go, there it is, the product of my pain. And now somewhere on the screen there should be a video which, according to YouTube, is the best video for you from my videos. If you want, have a look at it. If you don't want, don't. Okay, bye.